You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. Those tools that we have in our life are meant to support us through our journey, and they do not separate us. They do not give us the key to a perfect life. The biggest thing that I can do, or at least where my focus is right now, is pace myself through all of the change and transformation that I want to make now that I feel like I'm coming back to myself a little bit more. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I'm Felicia, and I'm so grateful to be sitting here sharing a moment with you to share a little bit of what's been going on for me. Right now, I'm going to be honest and tell you I'm feeling just a little bit under the weather this morning, but that is okay. I'm sure I've got a big 40 ounces of water here with me, and I know that this too shall pass. So I do want to start today's episode by just saying that I am so amazed by all of the support that came out after last week's episode. If you hadn't had a chance to check it out, either on our blog or on last week's episode of the podcast, I was sharing my own journey with the amount of weight that I've gained over this last year and just how it has affected me on my journey with my body. And so I did share 10 new approach commandments for loving your body, and I've had so much great feedback on those. I've had people messaging me like, hey, I've printed these out. I had somebody call me actually and tell me how much that just sharing that meant to them. That was like a wow moment for me. I was like, I didn't expect that, but I'm so grateful for it. And then I even had a friend say, hey, like because of you, I went out and got a scale. And I certainly don't think that that has to be the right solution for everyone. But I was really amazed by the power that she showed by being like, I'm going to take control over knowing what is happening with my body. That number doesn't have to change at all. It's not about that. It's about not being shocked by where we're at and by being in power. So I know that was a really vulnerable thing for her. I know it was for me when I stepped on that scale. And it really meant the world to me just seeing how many people kind of came out of the woodwork to share their support and to share their own experiences with me. And that it felt like such a community moment. And I will say, you guys, I am really putting some serious thought. I've been thinking about this for a little while, but I think it'll be this week, or at least in the next couple weeks, that I am going to be making some changes to my Patreon page to help facilitate more community discussions and connection. After this past year, like it has been more than a year now that we have just been in this aftermath and this ongoing destruction of COVID. I was able to connect with somebody who I haven't spoken with in over a year, and she was just kind of telling me like, yeah, the hardest thing that I went through over this past year was just the politics of everything. And I had to say that I really understood what she was talking about, because on top of having to make huge changes to your life because of this virus, and maybe that meant working from home or changing your job or having to work because you are a frontline worker and you're actually having to go into work, but you felt really unsafe doing so, or just navigating those conversations. I know so many people in my life and my community that have been pregnant over this past year and given birth, and navigating that chapter of their lives during COVID was very overwhelming in a lot of ways. I know for so many of us. And so, I can't think of anybody I know that I haven't had a very interesting conversation about how COVID has affected them. And, it's really interesting too, because now more and more people are getting vaccinated. And we're hopefully moving towards a place of actual herd immunity. And the CDC is releasing regulations like, hey, now if you are fully vaccinated, you don't have to take a COVID test before you travel. You don't have to quarantine after you arrive there if you've been vaccinated. And I think that there's more and more of this breath of relief, but there's also so much anxiety around it. And I've been really sitting with this, like, what is that anxiety? Like, trying to name it. Is it fear of the unknown? Is it, it must revolve around that somehow. We are such creatures of habit. And I think as much as we even long for socialization, and all of you extroverts out there, you're ready to go to your concerts and you're ready to go practice yoga with people and you want to get out and go out to breweries and all of this stuff. I do think that our new habit of being at home is going to take some time to shake off and become comfortable again. And I guess I can only speak for myself, but I've seen other people talking about this too, so I know I'm not totally alone in this. Just trying to get ourselves back to that place where we feel comfortable going out to eat again, where we feel comfortable showing up at work again. And I know so many of you probably have already started to navigate that in your own life in certain ways. Maybe you're back at church in person or not. Maybe you have been practicing at small yoga studios this entire time and that's worked for you. But I know for so many of us, there has been a sense of being in a bubble. And even if you were still going out and doing certain things, my guess is that you're probably doing so with some amount of caution, with some amount of change, whether you liked it or not. So into that bubble even a little bit. I think we're maybe all different degrees in or out of this bubble of safety protocols. And I think that we have to have a little bit of grace during this time with ourselves and with others. I was recently out on a job where we were kind of scouting out where this wedding is going to be, walking the space. And when we pulled up, of course, we step out of the car with our masks on, and the person who was greeting us was like, "You don't need to wear those here." That's how I took it, right? And actually, Dave and I had this long conversation about it because I got home and I felt a lot of things come up because we were outdoors and I was keeping my distance, so I did take my mask off. But I would have preferred to keep it on because that's just where I'm at with my level of safety. I have a business to run and there is no other source of income that supports my family other than what we're doing for weddings. So if we go down, like that's it for my household, for my family. So that is something that I'm constantly thinking about. Now I do feel very capable in my body, and if I would have felt so uncomfortable, I think that I would have kept it on. But it was one of those things where, like, I think the reason that I pulled it off so fast was not because I consciously felt comfortable to do so, but because I didn't want to get into a political conversation about the virus. And as I was reflecting onto it, that's the way that I perceive this conversation. And Dave was also there, and he didn't perceive it that way. He perceived it as though the person was kind of just trying to put out that invitation of like, hey, we're comfortable if you don't wear your masks. It certainly didn't come across like that to me, but I certainly would have appreciated it being phrased that way a lot more, like, hey, if you're comfortable to take off your mask, that's cool with us. And I was just thinking about this, like, wow, we're moving into this weird time where that is going to become more and more of a conversation where, and I hope that it doesn't get to that point where every single time is a a fight about it, you know? I mean, I can't tell you how many weddings last year that I shot where, you know, I think people meaning to be nice would, you know, be in the getting ready room. They'd be like, you don't have to wear your mask. And I think everyone lies on different sides of that conversation, right? Like for me, I really do credit the fact that we were able to stay so safe shooting weddings to the fact that we did take a lot of safety precautions and the fact that I wore my N95 mask every single wedding. Now, I don't know of any COVID outbreaks that happened out of any of those weddings that I shot last year, so maybe I would have been safe. But the fact is, like, you just don't know. You just don't know. And so, but I had so many brides that would give that as kind of an option because I'm sure they were worried about my level of comfort, right? You know, when you shoot weddings for people, you're in such an intimate environment with them. And you do feel this friend connection. Like I feel like every single one of the people that I work with are like my closest friends, especially on that day. I mean, you're just like in this beautiful moment with them. And I know that most of those invitations were just from a place of wanting me to feel comfortable. And I just had to kind of power through it and just say like, oh no, like I feel comfortable with this. Like this is just our policy, or I can't remember all of the things that I had come up with in the moment last year, but just really trying to stay in that place where I felt safe on my own terms. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to this idea of being in this bubble where you have people that are feeling different levels of safety. And we do need to be, first of all, respectful of ourselves and our own boundaries. Because if you're anything like me or have experienced some of those kind of weirder moments where you're like, okay, this person is implying that I've either made the wrong decision or that I'm a sheep. We love that. Or just looking down on you somehow. You do have to find that inner strength. And I think you are always more powerful if you decide your boundary ahead of time. And that's what I wish. You know, it's been so long since I've been out at a job site that I didn't have to navigate this mask situation in a while. And in a way, maybe I'm grateful because then I can get ready for what's to come. But I realize now that this is a moment for me to really sit down and figure out, okay, hey, what is my policy moving forward when I'm out at social events? Because this has been the longest off season that I've had not shooting weddings. Our last wedding was October 31st last year. So basically all of November, December, January, February, March, April. That is actually 6 months of not shooting a wedding. That is the longest I've gone without shooting a wedding because I usually have a couple off ones in like a November or February or a January or something like that. Or, you know, it's definitely not like the regular wedding season where there's, 8 to 10 weddings a month, but there's usually a one-off. But not this year. It's been 6 months. I mean, I've been doing plenty of engagement sessions and there's been so many new babies being born. I've been doing plenty of work, but not weddings. And our season opens up here this Saturday. And you guys, I am just trying to breathe and brace myself for what's coming. I mean, honestly, this week has kind of been, this past week, I've just been sitting honestly with like so much. It might be part of the reason that I'm feeling really drained right now is I've been really thinking about where we're at with everything and trying to really get mentally ready. I've been getting ready to make some changes to the Patreon page, hopefully some great ones that add more value, more connection, and that also support me in being able to manage running the Patreon through wedding season. So a little bit of both. But also I've been thinking about how I am as a boss, and I'm noticing over the past week some of my shortcomings, especially in regards to how I've kind of, welcomed Dave into the business. And you guys know we did, a couple months ago, we did a podcast episode on, just starting to transition out of his full-time job and how that was feeling. And one of the things that I told him, and he said he was starting to realize, is just how much space you need after you come off of working a W-2 job. It is a lot. It takes time to transition. And I think I was so trying to hold space for that. And also, that codependent part of me that doesn't want to offend, that doesn't want to step on people's toes, and that definitely doesn't love telling Dave what to do, because, he's himself and he doesn't really like being told what to do. I think that I have probably made some mistakes in how we've ran things. Like nothing huge, right? Like nothing that's going to affect the trajectory of where we're going. But it's more been an opportunity over this past week for me to realize, okay, I actually do need to step a little bit more into a place of leadership here in this dynamic between the two of us on a work perspective. And I need to be more gracious, and I need to lend more expertise, and I need to be more instructive. And I also need to expect a level of studentship back in return. And that's something that we are going to kind of have to figure out a little bit better moving forward. And I was grateful for that moment of revelation, though. And it kind of came after, one of our couples therapy sessions, but it also came after a really nice phone call that kind of came out of the blue with a really wonderful friend of mine who's also helped me with so much of my business stuff, my website and whatnot. And he's a male, so he was able to kind of lend me a little bit of a male perspective, as well as, he's ran his own business for a long time. So he's navigated some of these things before I have. And I really appreciated that. It was like one of those phone calls that kind of came as like a God thing, right? Like you're like, oh, thank you. Universe has my back here because I needed that conversation. But it's led me just into thinking, so much about all of these things, about our household, about managing ourselves through the busy season, trying to, I think that during the slow season, I was maybe in a little bit of a place of avoidance. And you guys, it's so hard for me to admit that, because I feel shame come up when I say I'm in a place of avoidance, because I have always viewed myself as such a strong leader, and I pride myself on that. But, just being honest, I don't think I was intentionally there, but I think I was there out of survival. And I think it goes back to what I was saying kind of at the beginning of this podcast, is just like the past year has been so much for so many of us in different ways. It has impacted us each differently. And it's something that I'm trying to keep in mind as I kind of walk around navigating this world is, each of us has kind of taken a different kind of battle wound during this time. If we're extroverts, we've been shut down, we've been withdrawn. If we're introverts, we've been in our little shell, but we've still maybe missed connection. For some of us, like we lost our place where we were teaching or practicing yoga. That continues to hit me more and more the further that I'm away from it. How much I miss that, how much I miss the people, just the faces, the community, breathing with everybody, not wearing a mask in that room. Like I've never realized how much I took that for granted. I'm going to start crying right now. Try to take a moment here. But yeah, the pains of this year have been real. And you guys know I've talked about this in the past. I think there's also plenty of space for the opportunity, the space, the transformation that it's brought. And there's time and place to be grateful for that. But it's okay to kind of, as we start to quote unquote get out of this or move out of this, to kind of start to realize like, oh wow, like I have been in a place of avoidance, or I've been in survival mode. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I can do, or at least where my focus is right now, is pace myself through all of the change and transformation that I want to make now that I feel like I'm coming back to myself a little bit more. And I to be honest, I don't know if it's all a conscious change in terms of like, yes, this is everything I want to be thinking about right now. Some of these things are out of necessity, right? Because I can't keep going the way that I'm going. And I do think that having strong personal practices and strong self-care practices have allowed me to realize that before it has become a problem, which I'm grateful for. But I also share all of this because I don't want anybody to think that just because you teach yoga or you teach self-care or you teach meditation, that means you have it all figured out all the time, or that you don't go through periods where you're stuck or depressed or in avoidance or angry or in conflict, right? Those tools that we have in our life are meant to support us through our journey, and they do not separate us. They do not give us this key to perfectionism, right? They don't give us the key to a perfect life. They are here to help support us as we navigate our way through. Phew, that was quite the introduction, wasn't it? Maybe that even became a little bit more of the heart of the show for today. I do want to have a moment for an astro check-in. So let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and talk about what's happening in the sky. All right, so last night we were out shooting at this amazing horse property out in Larkspur, and the sun was coming, obviously from the west where we are here in the mountains, and gosh, just amazing twilight glow, kind of just beautiful. But we turned around and there, rising over the trees, was the most beautiful full moon, just white against the most beautiful blue sky. And of course, it was one of those things that kind of stops you in your track and you're like, oh, there it is. Like, there she is. Sometimes, even though I follow the moon so closely, sometimes I am surprised by the transformation that she makes over, the course of a couple weeks. And it was one of those things that really kind of gave me so much comfort in that moment, just especially as we drove home. I always appreciate driving home in the darkness when there's a full moon in the sky. And then last night after we got home, I was sitting on Pinterest, kind of looking up ideas. I've been still on this kick where I'm obsessed with organization right now. I'm wanting everything to change. I want everything to be more organized, and it takes time, doesn't it? But so I was looking up organization ideas on Pinterest, and I clicked on something, and then all of a sudden I was crying. I was sitting there and I was feeling overcome with emotion. And I had this moment of like, what is happening to me? And then I was like, oh, right. There's a full moon right now, full moon in Scorpio happening. And it is a big one. It is kind of getting a lot of attention right now for being this. It's called the pink moon. April's pink moon in Scorpio, and it is also a super moon, so that just means it's closer to the earth, and so I think the effects of it are feeling pretty strong. In fact, last night on Instagram I shared something that was like, if you've been experiencing like crying for any reason, crazy dreams but like poor sleep, tension headaches, feeling just like really tired, like you can't keep your eyes open, or even just like a lot of those like kind of light bulb moments, then you can blame all of that on the full moon, right? In fact, it's so funny because one of my best friends and I, we have this joke where it's like, oh, I have this going on. I'm like, oh, must be the moon. Like we kind of have that like just kind of ongoing joke. But the moon is very powerful, and it can bring on a lot of emotions, and it can bring out that kind of restless part of ourselves, the part that's kind of trying to navigate everything. And it can also be this time where like we do feel like something is kind of exposed, like we're seeing the whole picture, and now we're ready to make changes, or we're realizing, hey, this is how things really are, and now this is what we need to do to change them to be better for us. Also, for me, I think that there's just been a lot of revelation of how much of stuff I need to let go of. Isn't that always the case, right? But here we are nonetheless. And now if you're really into this topic, definitely check out my most recent blog post, because I did write a little bit on this Scorpio Taurus moon and what is happening right now. And the main things that I want you to take away, especially because you're going to be listening to this as we start to move from the full moon into the waning moon and into the new moon, just how important it is for us to remember the opposition that happens when the full moon is in the sky. So if you're not into astrology at all, but you just take one thing away from this episode, it's just to remember that, do you ever get into one of those conversations with somebody you're probably pretty close to, where you find yourself arguing and you feel like you're saying different things, but really you're saying the same thing? That's a lot of what the opposition of zodiac signs are. So, and you can really see this with Taurus and Scorpio. I think they're great examples of such opposites, but also with a similar thread that runs through them. Because Taurus is known for being this energy that is very concerned with I have, right? So Tauruses are like, I want a routine. I want things my way. I am going to do this. This is my 20-year plan, and I'm going to execute on it. I'm a super hard worker. Tauruses also really enjoy security. Tauruses love, they're drawn towards like comfort in material things. So like having a beautiful house, having beautiful surroundings, eating really delicious food. That is all very Taurus. And Taurus is an earth sign. So opposite of Taurus, we have Scorpio. Scorpio, water sign. On the surface, doesn't seem at all related to Taurus, right? Because Scorpios are known for being kind of dark and twisty and concerned with power and heavily into like the mysteries of the world, right? But Scorpios are also very loyal, very much like Tauruses. Scorpios are also known to be very possessive. Very similar to this idea of Taurus. Taurus, it shows up a little differently, but the same kind of thread of I have, right? These are my things. And I think Scorpio takes it a one step further and really starts to pull on this idea of I desire, right? So now these are not just the things that I have that give me comfort and stability, but now I want to explore all of the things that I desire. So whether that is knowledge and information, or whether it is lust or sex or connection, and maybe it's power, all of those kind of things, the things that we made, that even the things that are maybe a little bit more taboo, but are such an important part of human nature. So we kind of have this thread, this opposition here, this Scorpio moon and this Taurus sun. And then we have a crap ton more planets in Taurus right now. We have Uranus in Taurus, we have Venus in Taurus, and we have Mercury in Taurus. So there is a lot of Taurus energy happening right now. And we all just need to do our best this week just to kind of ride through it. And I will say that what I'm feeling intuitively is just this deep sense that it is okay to slow down. You don't have to have all of the answers right now. In fact, this would be a wonderful time just to really focus on taking care of nourishing your senses, right? Like in my most recent full moon guide that was released to the Patreon, I actually kind of give instructions for this shower ritual where you kind of turn taking your shower into this really sacred moment of nourishing your senses, taking care of your body. And it's beautiful. I actually did it over the weekend and it felt amazing. It felt so transformative. I felt 20 pounds lighter afterwards, just in terms of some of the heavy stuff that I had been feeling like I've been carrying around. And if you are in that place of release where you need to get some stuff off your plate, just do it. Just find those things that really give you joy in your life, that allow you to take some of that stress off. And as always, I'm always just the biggest encourager that I just want you to take care of yourself. I know that I need to always work on that for myself, so I always appreciate that message when it's reminded to me. So I'm here to help you, just to remember, just to take care of yourself. So, you guys, I was going to do a segment on the full moon, but after the introduction and after just kind of having this moment here and chatting about what is happening with this full moon, I feel like that's going to do it for today's episode. If you would like a standalone episode about just working with the full moon in general, like not about the specifics, let me know. I have a standalone guide on my website that's available. It's a 10-page PDF that has 3 or 4 different rituals in it for the full moon, and talks about kind of different yin and yang properties and just how to, in general, work with the full moon cycle. So you can always check that out. But if you'd want me to talk more about it, if you're interested, just give me a vote that you'd be interested in that. Let's grab our card deck and do our drawing for today. All right, you guys, choosing from this Wild Offerings deck by Tosh Silver. You guys know this is one of my favorites, and it's the one that I have right here with me today. Let's see if we can pull a card that will just kind of be something extra for us to think about and consider during this week ahead. Don't know if you heard that card just fly out of the deck there. Oh, this is perfect. Calmness. The inner divine is the witness of all, remaining still and quiet, even during intense turbulence. So take a deep breath and then say, "Quiet my mind, dear Lord. May your peaceful calm take over." Well, that is just way more beautifully said what I was kind of trying to get at with just taking this time to slow down. I love that word for this, calmness. May we have calmness in the week ahead, and even finding that place to remain still and quiet, even during intense turbulence. I love that. I'm going to remember that as the waves of this week and the waves of this season begin to take form. Thank you all for being with me this week. I am sending you lots of love and support. And next week, if everything goes according to plan, I will be having another really inspiring interview. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully we'll have that for you next week. Enjoy the rest of your week, you all, and until next time.